while doing some spring cleaning on the home server, vacuuming out all the filters and whatnot, I realized, I've mentioned this thing in a few videos, but I haven't actually shown it. And, well, I might have shown a still image of it, but I haven't really gone over what's inside it and what kind of hardware I used. I'm using a Fractal Design Define R4 case. There's now an R5. I love this case. I use this on all of my computers now. Well, I can use the R5 now when I build a new one, or if I build a new one. But yeah, I got the windowed side panel one, which has a little scuff on it, which, it's acrylic. What are you going to do? It scrapes pretty easily. I chose this one for a couple reasons. One, I really like the plain aesthetics of it. The front is completely plain. It's a front door. I'll show that in a second. But when it's closed, it's completely plain. It's got good airflow for the 8 3.5-inch drive bays, which is a great amount. It's very unlikely I'll go past 8 drives. I currently have 6 installed. They're all 4 terabyte Western Digital Red series. I don't need the Red Pros, which run at a higher RPM, or fancy server drives. Reds are fine. So I've got the Fractal Design case, not only just because the aesthetics, but because there's 2 140 millimeter fans behind this door. They pull air in from the sides. You can see the little grill. They pull air in and just completely envelop all of the drives. So that's what I'm concerned about. I'm trying to keep the drives cool. The system itself is fairly cool. It doesn't use much power. Under heavy load, it's maybe 100 watts, and idle, it's like 50 with all the drives and fans spinning, give or take. So, not too bad. Any 6-drive NAS would use that much power. This particular one, because I'm running a proper, I have a really nice motherboard inside this thing, and the CPU is totally overkill for this. I mean, it's got an Intel E3 Xeon, the 1220 model, which is a quad 3.1 gigahertz CPU, which is a little overkill considering there is one user for this NAS. So my wife's system actually backs up to another machine. I'll probably combine both onto this machine at some point, but right now she has got a little Synology single drive NAS to back her up. She doesn't have that much data, whereas I have 7 terabytes or something on the drive. I'm running FreeNAS. I was running NAS for free, but a couple reasons made me switch to FreeNAS. I originally did pull out this case to clean it up and install new memory. One thing about FreeNAS is it loves memory. Specifically ZFS loves memory. So this is ECC memory. That's one of 2 major things that I wanted with choosing this board. I wanted ECC memory, and I wanted a CPU that had AES-NI instructions, which it's basically the ability to offload drive encryption to a specialized portion of the CPU. So whereas before, or with a regular Xeon that doesn't have these extra instructions, the CPU is tied up doing all the math to encrypt the drive and the data that's going through the CPU. This frees it up completely. So what happens is the CPU can focus on compression. When you have drive compression turned on, an advantage of it is that it actually speeds up data transfer, because the bottleneck is the hard drives. So the whole idea is that if you have compression on, if it's able to compress the data as it's streaming it, it can compress it practically instantly, in real time. Especially this system where the CPU is just so powerful relative to the amount of data that it's dealing with. So what you get is an actual increase in throughput, despite the fact that you're adding another instruction or another task for it to do. The increase is due to the fact that it can write less data to the hard drive. SandForce based solid state drives do the same thing. They do a hardware based compression in the controller, and they will compress data in real time to speed themselves up by writing less actual data to the flash drive, which is smart. It just doesn't work with stuff like MP3s and other compressed formats. Sorry about the weird angle, but the door only opens in one direction on this one. The R5 actually does let you swap it around, so shooting on my desk is kind of weird. So I've got a Crystal Fonts display in here. It has a 4 by 20 or 4, I think it's 4 by 20 display, and you can interface to it and have it show charts and stuff of CPU performance and stuff. For some stupid reason, FreeNAS doesn't have a built-in plugin for it, so you have to like compile it yourself, and I haven't gotten around to do that. I was using it in NAS for free, which had one built in. pfSense, which I use on the router, has that as well. So this particular case only has 2 optical drives, which is fine. You usually don't even need any these days. I used both on my main system because I have dual Blu-ray readers and burners. You've also got a nice push open front where you can get to a nice mesh grill that covers up the 2 140mm Noctua fans I have installed in here, and this thing just pops out too, so you can get right to the fans and change them around if needed. And it's got sound dampening foam all over it. This case is very quiet, and it's got a nice little magnetic latch on it too. Here we have the inside of the system. There's drive cages here that hold all the 3.5-inch drives. I still have 2 available. The motherboard is a Supermicro X9 SCL plus minus L for some, no, plus minus F, I think. Stupid name, but whatever. It's actually a really nice motherboard. We've got an Intel 1155 socket for Xeons. It's got 4 memory slots, and we've got some PCI slots, which will come in handy in the future. More on that in a bit. The case here has space for a 140mm fan here and 2 more up top. I actually have them plugged up with they come with these plastic panels with sound dampening foam on them, so you can plug up the holes in the bottom of the case and stuff wherever you're not using fans. I personally just have the one 140mm here. It's not equal, the airflow, because I've got 2 140s pulling in and only a 140 pulling out. I figure the openings and all the case and everything is enough to exhaust the rest of the air. I don't think these fans are really starved for air. I like the fact that I can close off the top and dust doesn't get in. You'll notice that the inside of this is actually very clean, and I haven't really done much to clean it. So, you know, I'm willing to trade a little bit of airflow for not having to clean any of the damn dust out of the thing. So anyway, about the motherboard, it has 6 serial ATA ports on it, all of which are filled. So in order to expand to 8 drives, I'm going to have to get a serial ATA controller and you know, just pop it in. Keep in mind, if you're using ZFS, you want a dumb controller. You want a controller that just passes the drives to the system. You do not want a RAID controller, and if you get a RAID controller, you need one that has been switched to just be a generic drive interface. You do not want anything interfering with ZFS. It wants direct access to the hard drives because it knows that hard drives suck. So it's, you know, doing everything it can to make sure nothing gets screwed up by air checking everything. And in order to do that properly, it needs direct access to the drives. So there's a few models, you know, you can Google around. There's a few models that are recommended for when you're using FreeNAS. So yeah, I've got this low profile Noctua cooler. It's the NH-79i. And it's very tiny. I mean, you can see it's barely taller than the memory, and yeah, it's very quiet. This is like the bare minimum cooling that a chip of this caliber needs. I think it's 80 watts, and this thing's rated for like a max of like 77 watt chips. I mean, the truth is this thing's never under full load for very long, because unless you do the full backup, which is very rare. It's usually only when I expand the array. It's not under load that much, so it's not a big deal. And besides, under mem test, which doesn't like super stress the CPU, but it does warm it up a bit. It never goes above like 43 degrees Celsius, and that's on a hot day. So nothing to complain about. And I actually have the speed limiting resistor from Noctua installed. I might actually take that out just because it's summer again. I might just take it out. The only thing I don't like about this cooler on this board is that you have to install it in this way where the heatsink doesn't match up with the voltage regulator heatsink, and it doesn't match up with any of the other airflow. Like when I'm looking at it, I can't remember if I actually ran into a problem with it, or maybe I just put it in the wrong way. I'm fairly certain it didn't clear this voltage regulator heatsink, and that's why it has to go this way. Because you can see all the fins are vertical. Well, you maybe not. It's, even in HD, it's probably hard to see. But the fins are vertical, and the fan's pulling in air and pushing it down over the fins and exhausting it here, because the design of this board is that the memory is blocking one side of this heatsink. So that all the air is just being pushed down, which isn't very efficient. Unfortunately, I'm kind of stuck with that. I don't think there's any real way around that. I was considering even putting in, just getting one of the smaller, an H60 or whatever liquid cooler, closed loop cooler, and just swapping it. But nah, it's working so far. Like I said, this thing, no heat problems so far, and it doesn't get too hot, so I'm not too concerned with that. Another nice feature about this motherboard is that there's an internal USB connector. So I have an 8 gig USB stick, just a SanDisk 8 gig. This board is limited to USB 2, so you don't really need to worry about having a fast USB interface. So I've got this nice little port here to put in the boot drive. The LCD in the front doesn't take up much space, so I've kind of just tucked away a lot of the wiring. These are wires for the onboard or the case USB 3 header or connectors. I obviously don't use them since this board doesn't have USB 3, so I'm not too worried about that. I just stick them away. Unfortunately, the USB ones you can't disconnect. I disconnected the audio, I think, and actually, now I can't remember if I disconnected the audio, but I disconnected the fan controller because this case has a fan controller, and I usually don't use this. I like the motherboard to handle the fan speed. I've also put in a little custom wire with a resistor to dim the blue LED that they put on the case. The blue LED is just ridiculously bright, so this is in the living room next to the TV, so I just stuck a resistor in line with the LED to limit it even more. The board has 2 Intel network controllers, gigabit, very, very nice. They're the best, in my opinion. Generic onboard VGA memory, serial ports, all sorts of stuff, tons of USB ports, all solid capacitors, because this is a workstation / server grade motherboard, although now most motherboards don't have, they've moved away from using electrolytics. So, that's not a huge feature anymore, but it is nice. It means this board will probably last a lot longer than I need it to. I've got 4 2 gig sticks of 1333 memory installed, all ECC. You pretty much need ECC memory to use ZFS properly because it's based around the fact that it trusts your CPU and your memory over the hard drives. So it needs to be sure that these are okay, and that it can trust all the data that that's coming from the memory. So you generally want ECC memory installed. I ordered 2 1866 speed 8 gig sticks, and I will probably sell all 4. I may keep 2 to keep it at 20 gig, but I haven't really decided yet. The 1866 memory will clock down. This CPU only supports the 1333 megahertz DDR3. There's also a third Ethernet port on the back, which supports the baseband management controller, so you can actually use a third Ethernet cable. I'm using two because I use LACP to combine the connection, double link. There is a lower wattage version of the CPU. Like I said before, this is the E3 1220. There's also a 1220L, which is their low power version. The difference being, I think it runs at a lower clock speed. I think it's only 2.8 gigahertz instead of 3.1. But in addition to that, it's not 4 cores, it's 2 cores with hyper-threading. So it's 2 cores, 4 threads. The main difference between hyper-threading is, like some people will incorrectly list it as having 4 cores. The real thing about it is that those extra cores provided by hyper-threading allow it to more efficiently organize threads when it's doing multiprocessing. So even though it shows up as 4 cores in a lot of systems, it's really just 2. And if something's trying to do work where it's not aware that it's hyper-threading, like older operating systems, it can basically jam up because it expects all the cores to finish their stuff at the same time, which it can't, because hyper-threading is just basically traffic management. It allows another thread to run, but it doesn't actually have the physical hardware to do it. I believe hyper-threading now in modern Intel chips can actually do basic things without having to wait for the CPU, but it's basically like merging a real lane with a, you got like a toll booth at the end of the street, and there's 2 toll booth windows, and you've got 4 lanes, and there's someone there saying, okay, this is the most efficient way to run the cars, merge them into these 2 real toll booths, but you're telling everyone there's 4 lanes to begin with 4 toll booths. So if that makes any sense. So it's all about how efficiently the CPU and the operating system can manage these virtual cores to get these threads all lined up and working properly, as opposed to them all all expecting to get through the toll booth at the same time, which they can't because there's only half as many real toll booths as there are lanes. So I mean, there's tons of videos that explain hyper-threading in a lot more detail and a lot clearer, but that's the gist of it. So the low power one, which is still like $150, I have considered buying it and swapping it out because I don't really need all the extra horsepower, but I haven't seen one at an affordable price yet on eBay. So I have considered getting the lower power version, but in the meantime, this super overkill quad core will just have to do. In addition to the 2 Intel NICs, there's also a third 100 base T controller, and that is for the remote management system. So you actually run another Ethernet cable to it, although, well, I should explain. You can use both network cards on their own, and it can piggyback along it. It will actually, like this could be 10.0.0.2, and it will also have a .3 address because that is the management controller. But because I use these linked up in LACP mode, I can't piggyback it. So there's a third port, which is just 100 base T Realtek, and that lets you give your baseband controller its own IP address so you can log into it. And it's a hardware level remote management, so you can do things like enter the BIOS and mount virtual drives, all sorts of stuff from it without having direct access to the hardware, which is really, really cool. You don't have to deal with having monitor, keyboard, all that stuff plugged in. There's a Corsair CX430M power supply in it. These are their pretty cheap ones. I don't think I've actually looked inside this one, but I think I did checked it online, and it seemed half decent, so I'm sure it will survive. It's never under heavy load. Like I said, the system never pulls like over 100 watts, so it's modular, and that was main feature. I always get modular power supplies just because I hate dealing with extra cables everywhere. That's my my bane, the bane of my existence when it comes to building computers. I just hate, especially power supply cables. I just hate having to deal with them. So this particular power supply is enough wattage, more than enough wattage, even when I go up to more drives and I get a controller card and stuff. And it also lets me get rid of a lot of the cables. Well, that's about it for the NAS. It's slowly being crushed. So I'm going to stick it back. One thing I did remember to do is I did remember to run memtest. Oh, he saw a bird. He's loose. I did remember to run memtest on this thing so I can show whoever buys it on eBay that the memory is tested. I would have taken it out, put in the new stuff, and forgot to test the old stuff. So luckily I remembered to do that. I'm probably going to leave it here for a couple days until UPS finally decides to show up with the memory they owe me.